Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's been an absolute minute since I've said that. It's maybe been like 6 months since I sat down and filmed a YouTube video. If all's gone according to plan, I uploaded a video last week, but I filmed that like 6 months ago. So it's been a long time since I actually sat down in front of a camera. And so I figured what I should do for the first video to get back into things is give you a bit of a life update. But I don't have that much to say, so the first half of this video is going to be a life update, a quick update on what I'm doing, where I'm living, what's going on in my life, because I'm sure all of you are nosy. And secondly, I want to share with you some of the best books and TV shows and films that I've read, watched, seen in the last few months since I've been gone, because that is a lot of the content that I was making earlier this year and that I want to continue making. And obviously I took a big break. So I'm going to use the second half of this video to just share with you some of the books that I've read while I've been gone that I've absolutely loved. So, without further ado, let's get into a quick life update. So I think the last major thing that I told you guys was that I was dropping out of my master's degree. I was living in Bristol and I was studying in Bristol and I was doing an integrated master's, which is where you sign up when you're like 18 to do 4 years, and that 4 years is basically a bachelor's and a master's rolled into one. And that's what I was doing. But what I found, and I made a whole video about this so I won't go into too much detail, is that the more I progressed through education, the less I liked it. To the point where I got to my master's and I hated it. So I decided to drop out halfway through my master's year. But luckily, because of the modules that I'd taken in the previous years, I was able to still graduate with a bachelor's. We're actually going to have our graduation ceremony in a few weeks' time. Because of COVID, my university is still catching up with graduation ceremonies, so it's happening in November. Who knows what? Well, it's because of COVID, but you know. And I'll be graduating with a first-class bachelor's degree in mechanical and electrical engineering, which is pretty exciting. Like, I did that. And I have to keep reminding myself because it's so easy to beat myself up and be like, oh, I failed. And I'm like, no, I'm getting a first-class bachelor's in engineering from the University of Bristol, which is one of the best engineering universities in the country. Things could be worse. So I did that. And then I knew that I wanted to carry on living in Bristol. I wanted to keep living with my friends. All my friends were there. I didn't really want to go home. And so I knew that in order to be able to stay living in Bristol, I would need to get a job. So I started applying for just kind of retail jobs, a couple of admin jobs, but mostly it was just retail. And I actually ended up getting a retail job that I absolutely loved and that I ended up doing from about March to about August of this year. So I stayed in Bristol all that time and was working in retail. I haven't said online what store I was working in, mostly because it is a very big chain, but they normally only have like one shop in each city. And so if I had said what shop I was working for, you all would have known the exact location where I was working. And just from a security point of view, I didn't want that. I didn't want people to know like the exact address where I was spending loads of my time. And the only reason that I'm not saying it now is because there's a slight chance, and we'll get onto this in a minute, but there's a slight chance that I might go back to working for them. And so for the same reason, I don't want to say yet what it is, but once I am absolutely certain that I will not go back working there, I will tell you what it was, and I will probably make a video or some kind of content talking about my experience, because it is a really popular high street chain, and I think people will be interested to know what working there is like. But I say, just from a security point of view, I'm not quite ready to tell you where that was. So I did that until August, and then it was time for me to leave Bristol, which is crazy. It's something I didn't think was going to happen. At the start of this year, I was convinced that I was going to stay in Bristol beyond my degree because I loved it so much, and it still is one of my favourite cities in the world, let alone the UK. But slowly, more and more of my friends accepted jobs away from Bristol, and I think it now is to the point where I know like 3 people living in Bristol still. Most of my friends have moved to other places, or a lot of people have just gone home for the time being if they don't have a job yet. But so many people were leaving or committing to leaving. And then what happened was that my boyfriend got offered a job in Cambridge, and I joked about it before, But I knew as soon as he told me that he was taking this job that I was going to move to Cambridge with him, because Bristol to Cambridge just would have been a nightmare. I was like, we don't have to live together, but I don't want to be that far apart, you know? Like, Bristol to Cambridge is a really hellish journey, and especially because at the time I was working in retail, we just wouldn't have been able to see each other much, and I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to prioritise our relationship. I absolutely love my boyfriend. You know, he is my best friend, my partner, and I didn't want to be that far away from him. And then also what happened is that one of my best friends from secondary school also got a job in Cambridge. And so I started talking to her I was like, oh my God, I could live with you. And the long story short, we thought about a lot of different scenarios. But the long story short is that the three of us are living together. So I'm currently living in Cambridge. I moved here at the very end of August, I believe. And we're in a lovely 3-bed masonette flat thing. We've got 2 floors, but it's like a block of flats. You know the sitch. And it's me, my boyfriend, and one of my best friends from secondary school. We're all getting along really well, and they both have full-time jobs, so they're actually not here that much. And yeah, we also all have separate bedrooms. Me and my boyfriend have separate bedrooms, which is something I can talk more about. I kind of want to make a video talking about relationships. If that's something you're all interested in and want to know about. But partly just because we're both introverts and we love our alone time and we love getting, you know, a good 8 hours of sleep. We are both the kind of people that if we don't get a solid 8 hours of sleep, we are grumpy. And we were like, there's an easy solution to this, and it's having separate bedrooms. And the second reason is that we are both, well, he's an engineer and I'm an aspiring engineer, and that can involve a lot of working from home. And you can't work from home in the same room as someone else, really. My boyfriend just got home from work, and I went to say hello for him for 5 minutes, and now I have absolutely lost my train of thought. Okay, but basically we are living in Cambridge, and that meant that I had to leave my retail job in Bristol, because obviously I was leaving Bristol, and the job I had was temporary anyway, and they were really lovely and let me stay as long as I did in the end, but that came to an end. And so I moved here, but I'm currently unemployed. I am looking for work, but I'm having a bit of an existential crisis about what I want to do with my life. I think I want to get some kind of engineering or engineering adjacent job, but it's just trying to find the right role in the right company. A lot of jobs for graduates these days in the kind of jobs that I'm looking at do this yearly cycle. And so some of the jobs that I've applied for are grad schemes that don't start until next September. Which I was saying is fine. Like, if someone could tell me now I have an engineering job lined up for next September, I would be fine with that and I would just get a retail job until then. But the not knowing is really difficult. And so many of these jobs have really long application processes and it's all a bit crazy. So I'm currently very undecided about what I want to do with my life. I'm looking for employment, but luckily I have enough savings and my family is still supporting me a bit that I can afford to take my time and make sure I apply for the right job instead of just applying for the first job that I see. For the last month or so, I've been living a very simple life in Cambridge. I've been moving in here, decorating and furnishing this place has been fun because this place came with hardly any furniture, so we had to buy a lot of furniture and fill it with decor and things like that. But I really love how my room is looking. I will definitely include some cutout clips if I haven't already. But yeah, I've been learning to ride a bike. Riding a bike is definitely the best way to get around in Cambridge just because it's quick and cheap, and I have a big fear of roads and cars, but I'm quickly learning how to cycle on the roads. All the roads around here have cycle lanes and cycle paths, so it's actually not as scary as it sounds. I've signed up for a gym and I've been going to gym classes. And yeah, I really want to get back into making YouTube videos, and that's what this is. I think that is everything that I wanted to update you on. As I said, the second half of this video is going to be me talking about books and films and things that I've loved recently. But since my boyfriend has got home, I'm going to go cook dinner with him, and I will film that probably tomorrow. So, see you in a bit, I guess. I got this jumper from my aunt. It's like a vintage Roxy zip-up thing. And I can't decide if it's a vibe or not. I'm like, do I love it or do I hate it? Unsure. But we're gonna go with it anyway. So, it is indeed the next morning, and as I said, I just wanted to include in this video some of my recent favourites, some of the books and TV shows and films that I've loved in the last couple of months, just in case you're interested in the stuff that I've been consuming. So first up, let's talk about books, and there is one author who I absolutely have to talk to you about because I think they are possibly my new favourite author, and that is Anthony Doerr. So earlier this year, maybe about 6 months ago, I finally read All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, which I think I've actually talked about in a previous video, but I absolutely loved it. I put off reading it for a while, I think just because of how long it is, but I finally sat down and read it, and I absolutely loved it. And I gave it 5 stars, which if you know me is very rare. I give out a lot of 4 stars, and now that I'm using Storygraph and I can give out half stars, I've given out a few 4.5 stars, but I really don't give out many 5 stars, especially to fiction. But I absolutely loved this book. I've learned that I really love a good historical World War II literary novel. I don't know why, but they just always get to me, and this book is no different. If you loved The Book Thief by Markus Zusak, I would really recommend checking out All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. They feel very similar, where it's set in this really tense setting of World War II Europe, but it's just so beautifully written and you just fall in love with the characters. Anthony Doerr just has a way with words. What makes that book so good is just the characters and how they're written. So we're following 2 people in sort of these parallel timelines or stories. We're following this girl who's about 10 years old, that kind of age. We do see her growing, but for most of the book she's, that kind of age. And she is blind, and I think Anthony Doerr does a good job of describing how she interacts with the world in a really careful and delicate way. I don't want to say beautiful because I know that he's not trying to romanticize the fact that she's blind, but it just makes her interaction with the world so interesting and so delicate while she's trying to navigate surviving World War II Europe while being blind. And then we're also following this boy, and this boy wants to be an electrical engineer. And just as someone who studied electrical engineering, I guess I was biased, but I really loved that, and how he talks about electricity like it's magic, again, was just beautiful. So it's just beautifully written and heart-wrenching, and I had to give it 5 stars. So that is the first book that I've read this year that I would absolutely recommend. And then I saw on sale his other book, Cloud Cuckoo Land, and so I just had to buy it. I basically immediately put this on my to-read list once I finished reading All the Light We Cannot See, but I wasn't planning on reading it immediately because it's another hefty book, but I saw it on sale, and so I just had to buy it. And I think I loved this one even more. I think this could be my favourite book of 2022. Which is crazy, but I absolutely loved this. And spoiler alert, I also gave it 5 stars, which officially makes Anthony Doerr the only author I've ever given 2 books 5 stars to. So statistically, I guess that makes him my favourite author. Crazy, I know. Now, this book came out about a year ago, I think, and it's actually really recently just came out in paperback, so it'll be really interesting to see if this book suddenly takes off now that it's out in paperback, because that often happens with books. But I think what's put a lot of people off reading this book, because All the Light We Cannot See was really, really successful and did really well. But I haven't seen that many people talking about this book, and I think it's A, because it's only just come out in paperback, but B, because it has a really complicated premise. And I know, again, that's why I was a bit wary of reading this book, But as I say, I wanted to give it a chance because I loved All the Light We Cannot See so much, and obviously because when I saw it on sale, I was like, well, I just have to buy it. But I will say that although this book has a really complicated premise, it only took me about 50 pages or so to get into the book. I will admit for the first 50 pages or so I was a bit confused, but after that it was absolutely fine, and I immediately fell in love with it and really enjoyed it. So I would say that if you enjoyed All the Light We Cannot See and you've been nervous about reading this book, definitely pick it up, because if you enjoyed Anthony Doerr's writing, this book is just as magical. So let me try and explain what this plot is about. I'll have a go. We're following these 5 different characters across 3 different timelines. 2 of them are sort of paired up, and then one of them is on her own. So we've got 2 people that are living in the 1400s, a long time ago, who are called Anna and Omir, and they live these sort of interacting stories, or their story eventually comes together. So you're following those characters. And then in sort of present day time, and sort of the 1900s and the 2000s, we have Zeno and Seymour, whose lives interact. And then in the future, on a spaceship, we're following this girl called Constance, and she's living on a spaceship in like 100 years time, so in the future but not too far away. So we're following all 5 of these characters who are living completely different lives, but the one obvious common thread in their lives is that they're all interested in this book called Cloud Cuckoo Land, which is, I had to go away and do some research, but this book is made up, it doesn't exist in the real world, but it's meant to be. And in this book it's treated as this classical text, a bit like the Odyssey or the Iliad or something like that, where it's like, this really, really old classical text. But it's really interesting to see how all of our characters interact with that story. And this really is a book that's, what's good about this book is the writing, more so than the plot. So although that plot sounds really complicated, the writing is just beautiful throughout. And it's all about friendship and survival and books and writing and libraries and lost texts, and I loved it. It's really hard to describe, and I feel like I need to sit down and take some time to work out how to pitch this book to people, because I don't know if that was a successful pitch, but I loved it. I don't know if I'm biased because I just read it. I only finished this a few weeks ago, and maybe in a couple of months' time I won't be as excited about it, but right now I'm just so excited about this book. I just keep thinking about it and just how it made me feel. It's just warm and fuzzy and beautifully written and sad and emotional and all of the above. Please read Anthony Doerr's writing. He has one other novel, I believe, called About Grace, which I've never heard anyone talking about, but I feel like I need to try and read it to see if I like it. And then B, I just need him to write more books, because I will now be buying anything he publishes from here on out, because he's the first author I've given 2 5-stars to. And then a couple of other books that I quickly wanted to mention. Firstly, a graphic novel, which I haven't read many graphic novels, but it is something that I want to get into. Brenna Fumler's graphic novel adaptation of Anne of Green Gables, which I absolutely loved. The illustrations were just beautiful and would be a perfect book to read this time of year, because if you know, so much of Anne of Green Gables is about fall and just love of nature, and it's just, the illustrations were just incredible, and it's really made me want to read more of Brenna Fumler's work. She's more known for the graphic novel that she actually wrote the story of as well, which is called Sheets, so I definitely need to check that out. But I would highly, highly recommend her version of Anne of Green Gables. And then a couple of non-fiction books that I wanted to talk about. Firstly, I recently listened to I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jennette McCurdy, who, if you don't know, is the actress who played Sam on iCarly. This is definitely like one of the books of the minute. Everyone is talking about this book and reading this book, but it just is amazing. It's really well written and it's just so interesting, especially as someone who, watched a lot of Disney Channel and Nickelodeon. It's interesting to realise what the lives of some of these people were like. Jennette McCurdy in particular went through so much trauma in the first 20 years of her life. Crazy. She must be a very brave and very strong woman to have survived what she survived, and just how many things she's gone through. It was just fascinating to read about. It's definitely one to check the trigger warnings for. She talks about, you know, family trauma and family abuse. Eating disorders is a huge amount about eating disorders and body dysmorphia and that whole world of body image. And then obviously the fact that she was a childhood star and Hollywood and fame and all of that stuff. And then the last book that I quickly wanted to mention is a book that I'm still currently reading, which I have on my desk here, is Utopia for Realists by Rutger Bregman. This book is taking me a while to read because I'm trying to sort of study it. I've been annotating it, as you can see, with highlighters in various colours. I have a bit of a colour code at the front. And then I've also been taking notes on it on Notion, writing down like the key ideas and the key things that I want to take away from it because it's fascinating. I knew this book was going to be a favourite when I picked it up, but it is. It is as good as everyone says it is. It's basically all about how we can make this world a better place, and how that is actually achievable. And it's a really practical book to making the world a better place. So a lot of this book is about, you know, how we can end poverty and the idea of a universal basic income. That's what the couple of chapters that I've just read have been about. And Rutger Bregman does an amazing job of laying out these ideas, laying out the evidence supporting them, disputing the evidence against them or the claims against them. And he just does a really good job of laying out these ideas in a really, really understandable way, in a way where it makes it really hard to argue with what he's saying. And the point of this book is that if you feel pessimistic about the world and you're worried that nothing can ever be better, this is his way of being like, we have what we need to make the world a better place, and here's how we do it. And these are the things we should be fighting for. You know, be optimistic because we have the solutions we need and we just need to enact them. A better world is possible. And it's really just been good food for thought. Would definitely recommend it. Will definitely be joining my non-fiction Hall of Fame shelf once I've read it. So, those are all the books that I wanted to talk about. Next up, let's talk about movies. The one that's absolutely stood out to me and I think will be my favourite movie of the year is Where the Crawdads Sing, which is adapted from the novel by Delia Owens. I do know that there's a bit of controversy around the author, which is sad because I love this book so much and I love the film just as much. I think what's really good about this story is that it's a bit of everything. We have a love triangle, but I wouldn't call this a romance book. There's a murder and a bit of a whodunit, but I wouldn't call it a murder mystery book. There's lots of gorgeous descriptions of nature. Our main character ends up growing up to be like a scientist, and she illustrates these nature encyclopedias. And so there's this real love of nature. And in the film as well, the cinematography is incredible. It must have been so much fun to film because they went to some gorgeous locations and the film is stunning. And it's also a coming of age story. They talk about race and gender and power and class. It's just a bit of everything. And I think that's what makes it such a good story. And I say the book is just so well written and the film is stunning. So would definitely recommend both the book and the film. And then TV show wise, the best TV show that I've seen recently has definitely been It's a Sin. This was on the BBC maybe like a year ago, roughly. So I'm a bit late to the party, but it just came onto Netflix and finally I saw it and was like, right, I'm actually going to sit down and watch this. And it's not even that long. It's like a mini series. I think it's like 5 one-hour episodes. That's it. But it's just so well done. It is about a group of 20-somethings living through the AIDS crisis in the UK and how the AIDS crisis affects their lives and this group of friends. And it's just incredible. It's A, really well filmed. B, the characters are amazing. They're so lovable and you sort of fall in love with all of them, which only makes it more heartbreaking when they're affected by the AIDS crisis. And obviously it's it's somewhat informative in teaching, you know, people about the AIDS crisis and why it's something that we should be talking about and should be remembering, to make sure that this kind of injustice, especially when it comes to affecting a marginalised group doesn't happen again. I think it's an interesting one because it's something that my generation just doesn't really know much about. I was obviously born after it, and it just isn't something I know much about. I wouldn't say this is the most informative series. I'm sure there are documentaries or books I could read that would be far more informative, and maybe that's something I should do as a follow-on from watching this. But as an introduction, it was really powerful, and obviously the emotion behind it, because you fall in love with these characters and you start to care about them, really makes it really powerful. And yeah, would definitely recommend if you're looking for a TV show to watch, but it is emotional. It's not an easy TV show, but if you want a good TV show, would definitely recommend it. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that I've just started watching Shadow and Bone. I have been reading these books in a hellish order. I have read Six of Crows, which I have up here somewhere. I'm completely destroying my pile of books up here. First of all, I read Six of Crows, which I actually quite enjoyed. I gave it 4 stars, so a very good fantasy book. I'm trying to persuade myself to get into fantasy, but I'm not a fantasy girly. And a couple of people suggested this as a good book to start with. So I read Six of Crows, and I quite liked it. And then I read Shadow and Bone. As I say, we're not going to talk about the hellish order that I'm reading these books in, but I am going to plan to finish at least both of those 2 miniseries within this universe. I'm not really doing a good job of explaining this. I'm assuming that you all know about the Grishaverse, but basically Leigh Bardugo has written a whole load of books in this universe called the Grishaverse, and there's a few different series. So I've read Six of Crows, which is the first book in one of the little mini-series, and I've read Shadow and Bone, which is the first book of another one of these little mini-series. But I am planning to read Crooked Kingdom and Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising, but I'm going to continue to read them in whatever order happens. Please, I don't know why I'm reading them in such a strange order. I don't have an excuse. But now that I've read Six of Crows and Shadow and Bone, I could watch the TV show, because those are the 2 books that the TV show is based on. There are quite a few plot changes from the books to the TV show, which is annoying, but otherwise the TV show is actually really good. And I'm only on like episode, I think I've watched 2 episodes so far out of like, I think it was like 8, something like that. But there is another series coming, although I'll probably need to read some more books before we get to the future series. But I'm just enjoying this universe. It's nothing amazing. It feels very 4-star to me. I'm like, it's solid, but it's nothing amazing. But I'm enjoying getting lost in this universe. So yeah, those are all of the things that I wanted to mention in this video. Just a rundown. As I say, these aren't necessarily my favourite things of the year. They're just the things I'm loving at this moment in time, and the things that are floating around in my head at the moment. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully this is the start of me getting back into YouTube. So hopefully I will see you next week. I'm going to say that, and I'm hopefully going to mean it. Let me know in the comments down below if there's any videos that you want to see, because I'm definitely in need of some video ideas. I have 2 or 3, but beyond that, I'm not sure. So if there's anything you want to see from me, let me know. I make all kinds of content. I want to talk about books, but I also want to talk about sustainability and minimalism and happiness and productivity, because we know I'm a nerd for those things. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I will see you soon.